Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what is actually only the second ever connected series episode that we have done. I'm very, very pleased today to welcome Vasili, who is the CEO of COCA. Now, for those who don't know, and I suspect most of you do because I mention them quite a lot on the Alpha Leaks episodes that I do. COCA is currently one of the cleanest examples right now of what self-custodial banking can actually look like on a day-to-day basis. And on today's episode, we're going to be finding out what that actually means for users, what's been changing, what kind of problems that COCA are solving, within the banking space. And of course, we'll be touching upon the recent partnership announcement between both of our companies around Aurora Intents. But before then, Vasili, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And look, I guess we'll kick off right by talking about what COCA's been doing, and what kind of brought you to build COCA out and form COCA. I think that's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, thanks, Declan. Hey, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And huge thanks for the Aurora team to be able to be here today and to say a bit of the product we're building right now together with Aurora, basically. So yeah, with regards to the product itself, I think that's an interesting story. I myself I've been in crypto since 2019, and since then basically one of the focuses and like ideological stuff I had was basically self-custody. The thing I've loved from the first time I've thought about it, and about Bitcoin stuff, starting from Bitcoin and then to the event chains and etc. And I was really in love with the idea that we move away the ownership of the funds from some sort of centralized organization, which can be a bank, exchange, or etc., to you as a user. And that's where my journey in crypto started, with a bunch of projects which were basically devoted to self-custody. At a certain point, I think I've partnered, and we were serving Virex as one of our clients, and that's where I've met wonderful co-founders, which basically is Dmitry and Pavel, and we've decided to move the self-custody forward with an idea of why not to build a bank or something which looks like a bank, where you as a user owns your funds, where you are in control. No one can block you. No one can eliminate the access, and which looks like, for instance, Revolut in UI UX, but still complete ownership. And that's, I think, was the idea. And starting from 2025, we were basically building this idea in terms of a product, starting from a small MVP to where we are now.
No, look, amazing. And look, as you know, obviously, my background before Aurora was very much in the banking space. I was actually part of the Revolut team. And I remember when I first entered this space, there was a phrase that was going around. I think I first heard it at Token 2049 in like either 2020 or 2021. And it was be your own bank. And I remember hearing it at the time, having just come from Revolut, right? And I was like, I don't know if you'd ever want to be your own bank, right? But then, of course, this whole kind of narrative around self custody and, of course, now privacy, has become more and more important. And that was definitely one of the things, I guess, that I found most interesting about COCA. I remember the very first time we spoke, right, it was meant to be a 20-minute call. I think we spoke for nearly 2.5 hours, going through all of the challenges and, the obstacles that needs to be overcome. But I mean, look, if you look at banking today, one of the biggest issues, still for the traditional banks, probably not so much for the fintechs, but it was onboarding and KYC. They are and were big blockers. And for self custody, surely that must be much harder. So how do you actually manage that for COCA users? Where are the challenges there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when we always speak about some certain regulated kind of stuff, and of course, even the modern fintechs, the self-custodial ones, are still to a certain extent regulated. The first thing that comes in place is, of course, onboarding experience. It's always a challenge. So the onboarding kind of thing, that's something we are always constantly looking at, thinking about how can we improve the flow. And it starts with small things. So, for instance, when we only launched COCA, it was only limited to Europe, basically. At that time, as it was now basically at such an extent, the MiCA rules and etc. So everything was significantly easier to handle. But we started small, trying to like onboard the first users from Europe, because in terms of regions and onboarding, it always depends what the region is, what the risks are there in terms of different policies you need to comply with. So and you can like place it in certain flows you need to understand and you need to handle. First, of course, that's basically UI UX, how you do the onboarding from the application perspective. So should you give an access to the product before like requiring the user to complete a KYC? And that's the flow we've selected, because some of the neobanks you might be joining now, they first of all require you to get an access to pass the KYC before getting a certain, even a slight hand on the features. And that's what we've deliberately tried to avoid giving you an access to try a bit of self-custody and see what we offers before requiring you a KYC at certain step. And the other side is basically the region you are from. So, and that's for non-fintech people, sometimes it's hard to understand that it's not only our desire to limit certain functionality or an access within certain regions to the product, but it's basically the regulations. So for the majority of time to launch the card within a new region, there is much to be done for it to be acceptable within the local authorities. So I think one of the hardest challenges here we see is always improving UI UX to make this onboarding challenge as easy as could be, without no Web3 complexities, because from on top of the platform there's basically a blockchain, self-custody, which cannot be made within the centralized tools. So that's, first of all, that's UI UX. Secondly, that's new regions and combating many challenges we have there, starting from local regulations to the IML rules we need to adapt to certain new regions. That's hard, but that's not impossible. And we are always trying to track what are the mistakes on our end, or what are the rules we need to adapt to make the onboarding as easy as we could be on the one hand, and at the same time how to stay within this regulated playground where we need to comply with the rules in order not to be blacklisted as an app.
Yeah, a playground's a nice word for it. I remember quite a few of the challenges within that space myself. And it's interesting though, right? Because, if you look at traditional fintechs, Monzo, N26, Revolut, Airwallex, they really only have to kind of battle one kind of set of regulations, right? Well, one very, very broad set. But, for you've actually got, you can almost double trouble, right? You have to make sure that you're compliant, from a cryptocurrency perspective, but also from a finance perspective. We're obviously seeing with the establishment of the MiCA regulation, and of course we've got the Clarity Act that's coming within the United States. How have you managed to, I guess, tackle the changes that these kind of regulations kind of bring to users, right? Because user behavior, arguably, it does change depending on kind of trends and what they like. For example, AI is appearing in all of the banks now. But actually, it also tends to change based on what they're told is the correct process, right? So if a regulation comes in that says you must do, I don't know, Face ID or something else, then they're going to do that. Have you seen much change in users' behavior, in the last year at COCA?
Yeah, sure. So, for instance, one of the recent examples I can remember is basically a huge transfer from USDT volume to USDC. As soon as USDT got issues with Europe, I think that's one of the largest transformations in terms of the deposit and withdrawal flow we've seen. And that's why we've limited a bit the opportunities to do the USDT deposits for European citizens and certain payments, because initially when we launched the cashback program May last year, the rewards were sent in USDT, and many users were complaining because, guys, Mika is like placing a burden here. We don't want to get USDT rewards. Can we switch to USDC? And that's where we've made the transformation where you select currency basically as a reward one, which is either the USDC or the EURC in terms of the euro payment. But yeah, I think that's a constant process where you need to always be aware of what is happening within the like general regulations playgrounds, the ones we've called it, and like you've truly mentioned that for us it's a bit harder because from one side there are fintech, let's call them fintech rules we need to follow and to track. And from the other side, there's the crypto regulations, which we also should comply with. And from certain perspective, it's hard even to talk to the national authorities on this, because when you speak with a crypto native or crypto experience guy and talking about self-custody, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. When I mean self-custody, you own, but from certain perspective, it's hard, for instance, to explain what account abstraction is, because within the classic account abstraction, you can get the key which you can import to MetaMask and say, okay, I own the fund because that's basically a smart contract wallet, a bit separate. And for the authorities, it's a long step journey to explain all of this stuff. So of course, AI helped a lot. In how we track those changes which happen globally, not only within like I would say largest jurisdictions and regions where we are operating, such as Europe, and we're currently looking in the United States, but also in certain specific countries, such as, for instance, South Africa and etc.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I think, I guess so, as we're on the topic of users, I guess another challenge that you've got is it's not only that you have to deal with regulators on both sides of the pond. COCA in itself is somewhat of a paradox, or arguably a dream for other projects, right? Because you don't just live in Web3. You're straddling both. You have Web2 users, you have Web3 users. You're offering Web3 functionality in a Web2 kind of environment, right? How have you been able to kind of manage that? Because you're going to have users that just want to use it for banking, and then I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also going to have a lot of native crypto users that are maybe going to use it more like a trading app. Is that something that you've experienced, or have you found that most users are kind of following the same usage patterns?
No, there are certainly different usage patterns, different personas we have within the product. I think as we started, it was basically a story about a crypto non-custody wallet with a card. And it was fine for crypto enthusiasts and the experienced guys. But as soon as we started this transformation from the wallet to a more like a banking app or a money app or a fintech, that's where things have changed. We've received many positive feedback in terms of how this transformation went for those who are not very Web3 friendly guys, because the requirements from my side and from the product team was, let's take the best from the traditional fintechs in terms of the experience they offer, in terms of how the transactions are managed, etc., and build it on top of the blockchain infrastructure and the self-custody one. And of course, there are tricky places. For instance, I think one of the trickiest places we had was basically a seed phrase and that kind of stuff. That's number one. We managed to play a bit with it through certain infrastructure providers we had to eliminate the seed phrase, but inevitably right now we understand we should give the user the opportunity to get the seed phrase to be able to offer 100% self-custody to the users. But at the same time, there is an issue here, because when you give such and very sensitive data to the users who are not comfortable managing this, and they do not understand the critical degree of this kind of stuff, that's where it's very hard to explain. So right now there are several groups of users we have, for sure. That's basically those who use it as a banking app, they don't use crypto at all. Basically, for them, the COCA is just a substitute for their local banking apps or for like neobanks such as Revolut and others. There are people who are with us since our early days, who are the crypto guys. They still look at COCA more like as a crypto bank rather than like more non-Web3 native banking experience. This is where we are moving right now. And it's always for us a challenge how to leave all the best we have and the features we had for Web3 friendly, and how to make the UI and interface and the flows as simple as we could for those who are non Web3 friendly. And that's basically was one of the ideas and challenges we faced was with regards to also the deposit flow, because there are many people who are only joining Web3 and are interested in playing a bit with stable coins, right? With Bitcoin and other stuff. And we were always trying to find the best partner here, how to manage this deposit and withdrawal flows cross-chain without this like complex story of managing the blockchains and chains. And that's where one of the things we were really like catch up with you was regarding this cross-chain story, which Aurora can handle through deposits. And I think that's one of the use cases where those who are Web3 curious are able to get a very convenient experience. At the same time, those who are aware of Web3 are able to see that there is a good transparent partner who is handling this stuff in terms of the bridging of the funds, and that's not like some centralized thing we are using internally.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, look, I remember even back in 21, right, when Revolut first launched, crypto, is massive. There was news all over the place about how terrible it was and blah blah blah. But there were challenges, right? You couldn't be self-custodied. You can now with certain assets, but even now, right? I mean, I was writing something for an article the other day, and I was reading about this study that took place last year, and I think it was like 58% of people within the crypto thought that they could just reset their seed phrase or change it, right? And even then, of those that knew they couldn't, they didn't understand enough about how to manage those seed phrases, or that they couldn't be recovered if they were lost. And I mean, you've explained it, and it sounds like COCA are handling it really well, but that's a hell of a trade-off, right? Balancing that kind of self-custody with users who potentially know very little, about how crypto works. Have you found what's been kind of your solution for that, right? Has it been falling back on compliance? Has it been making things super simple? Has it been restricting certain behaviors? Like, how have you actually managed to kind of almost protect users from themselves in some cases?
Yeah, I think that's a very tricky story in terms of I don't think there is one company on the market right now who completely solved this puzzle. So because that's not something at the moment you can give a good solution to. Maybe it might differ in a year or two, but right now, so there is a compromise here between security and simplicity. During our launch in April, not launch, but after we switched to complete self-custody in April this year, basically one of the things we decided to do initially was to hide for a certain period of time the ability to export the private keys until we find a proper way to communicate this with the users, especially to communicate this with those who are not so aware of the specifics of the seed phrase and private key. So right now we are in process of introducing this feature once more back to the app, the expert one. So and that's where I'm a big ideologist with regards to the iterative approach.
Mhm.
So the way I see this is we will bring in play our vision of how this process should be handled. And then we will collect a bunch of feedback from the users themselves, especially from those who are just looking at Web3, in order to understand how should we communicate in a better way this story, to conduct user surveys, and etc. That's what we've already been doing, but not at such a large scale if we take into account the whole COCA community and COCA users. So we want to make it simple. So at the end of the day, ideally, we want to be able to get the complete transparent ownership for all of the wallets and addresses and the seed phrases we have. At the same time, like placing tons of attention to how sensitive this data is and how you should handle that. One of the things we've discussed, I think, on our previous calls with you was the inheritance issue. And I think maybe within next year, we'll get closer to building certain also inheritance mechanism instead of just showing the seed phrase. Maybe something like Argent was having in its early days, like a social recovery kind of stuff, and etc., without showing the key itself, but making sure you're able to get an access in case of emergency.
No, amazing. And look, I'd be remiss, of course, not to take the opportunity whilst we're talking about kind of users, to obviously talk about the fact that you, of course, have just made changes to how users fund their COCA account. And also how they trade COCA, and it's been fantastic working with your team. These kind of partnerships work much more easily, right, when you're dealing with responsive people, but also people that clearly care, right? Like you guys have given kind of loads of really cool feedback and stuff that's not only unique to you, but something that stuff that benefits others as well. Perhaps you could talk a bit about the new features, in partnership with Aurora that you've launched, why you've done it now, and I think as well you've got some demos to kind of really help users visualize what this journey now looks like.
Yeah, sure. We will, of course, get back to the demo, but beforehand, with regards to the overall features update we had recently, it was basically devoted to two things, mainly because the users requested them. So that's a separate constant job we are doing, is reviewing everything, every suggestion, every community proposal we see in Telegram and other social networks. And some of them recently were devoted to the ability to buy sell COCA token, because basically the token itself is a fuel to the tier system we have. Previously, it was a bit hard to get your hand on COCA, and I think that's what you've also faced yourself when trying to break through the tier system and grab a higher tier. So that was always for us a constant work on finding a suitable partner here, and we wanted to do this in a self-custody manner. From certain kind of product flow, we were not able to fully provide it through a DeFi flow, because the way one of the early iterations we had was basically based on top of Aerodrome pool, and it was not working great. When we do the certain like lab tests with the buy sell procedure, we've considered that that's not what the thing we want to release, mainly because of certain things like a slippage, which can be completely different. You are not getting the amount you want to, or you're getting a bit more, or even significantly more than you might need, as well as a price impact was significant, meaning that you can pay twice the money you're able to pay from other sources, because in order to get a certain benefit here in terms of the price, you need a very high liquidity volumes, which grow organically, but you need time for that. But the users need COCA right now, here and today. That's why buy and sell COCA was one of the most important things where we took a look at intents you guys been building. And the other thing was basically the cross-chain deposits. So I think we've always wanted to increase the amount of networks we support, as well as the assets. And the recent release with Aurora Intents which powered not only the buy sell of COCA, but also the deposits flow is only the first step. Because making one step ahead, so users will have much more assets and chains in terms of both deposits and withdrawals. Because right now you can only withdraw your assets in crypto in USDC and EURC, but soon you will be able to do that not only in stables, but also in Bitcoin, in Ethereum, and many other assets. And all of this will be powered by Aurora Intents. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, we can have a look at the features and how the deposits flow look right now. But I think it's like, truthfully speaking, it's very straightforward.
Yeah, no, amazing. Well, look, let's bring them up to the screen. Let's have a quick look here. So I guess I think there's two components, right? There's the buy and exchange, and then we've got the balance. So if we start with the buy and exchange, okay, that should be popping up now. Okay, here we go. So perhaps you can walk people through it.
Yeah, so basically what we've made is we've introduced the idea that you are able to buy the amount of COCA you need to handle, like to advance to a specific tier. It's happening a bit fast, but
Yeah.
but still, it's nevertheless it shows how fast the purchase is, basically. So it happens almost instant. So
Here
yeah,
we go.
here you are
I can
able.
slow it down for
Yeah.
you. There we go.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot. So basically, as you can see here, we are always showing you the amount of COCA you need to advance to the next tier. And with just a simple tap, you can grab the next tier and not manually enter the amount of COCA you might need. We're also showing the perks you will get with each tier. So basically, the flow is pretty straightforward. You enter the amount of COCA, the funds you are paying via your USD account right now. You don't need to do the like certain on-chain swap somewhere else in the app to connect through Wallet Connect or doing some complex stuff. You're doing this completely through in-app experience and through your in-app account. So for instance, if you're a regular Web2 user and you are not familiar with DeFi, you don't see any problem. So you can just deposit the funds to your COCA account, and you can buy the token directly from it, and then sell it also directly to your USD account. And yeah, the purchase happens within a few steps. So basically, that's enter amount, confirm, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at the start of the video. And look, I think, it's probably a good opportunity to really kind of just briefly touch upon what it means in regards to COCA tiers, because I think both of us, obviously, we're familiar with it, right? And we've talked about it a couple of times so far. But just to those listening, what's the advantage of a COCA tier? What does it mean for users?
So for us, when we were elaborating idea of how we build like a competitive fintech experience, one of the things we were always trying to understand what are the rewards we can bring in play for the users. Because of course, not only the UI UX matters in terms of switching from one fintech to another, but it also certain perks and benefits the fintech offers, which plays a huge role in this loop of using a fintech product. When we look at what DeFi and blockchain offers in terms of rewards, we were amazed in terms of how we cut our own expenses on managing the infrastructure, and secondly, how DeFi can help generate revenue without us paying a single penny. And that's where that's what we've incorporated into our tier system. So basically, tier system for you as an end user, that's a bunch of tiers where you get certain perks depending on how much COCA token you are staking. By staking, I mean that when you advance through tiers, we are not taking the token from you. You're basically purchasing it, locking it to getting access to certain perks. And at the end of the day, you can withdraw from the tier, get your tokens back, sell them, and get the double revenue in both the token price change as well as in terms of the cashback you've earned. So depending on the tier, you get certain cashbacks in terms of subscription rebates, for instance, like the ones referring to Chat, GPT, Claude, and etc. Depending on the tier, you get different subscription perks in terms of categories. This can be music, such as, for instance, Apple Music, Spotify, and etc. It can be AI subscriptions I mentioned before, or something referring to YouTube Premium and etc. And the most important part is that you are getting a higher cashback depending on the tier you are. So the largest cashback is right now at Elite tier, where you get 8% cashback on eligible transactions. Yes, we do exclude certain transactions from being eligible for a cashback in order to secure the cashback and loyalty program itself.
Of course, yeah.
But for the majority of organic spends like groceries, taxis, restaurants, it covers completely all of your regular spendings. Yeah, in terms of COCA here, its role is pretty straightforward. You get it, you stake it, you get the perks. Don't want the perks anymore, you withdraw, get COCA back, and stay, for instance, as a started here. So yeah, that's why it was critical for us to like place this functionality in place. I mean, the purchase of COCA token and selling of it directly through the app for the users to be able to put their hands on the loyalty program we have.
No, I think it's a great synergy. If they trust in you and trust in your community and what you're building gives back. And I think that kind of synergistic relationship, is quite important. And of course, it's not just buying and selling COCA, that you guys have recently pushed out. You kind of alluded to this earlier, of course, the cross-chain deposits. So we're just going to bring that up on the screen now, and then of course I will manually slow it down. But perhaps you can talk about what it was like before versus, what it's looking like today.
Yeah, it is in a certain way it was something similar to what you're seeing right now, but that's one of our first iterations of improving the deposit flow. So basically, previously you had significantly less assets to deposits and less chains. Yep. So for instance, with us switching to Aurora Intents, we were able to introduce Tron for USDT deposits. And that is still actual and very requested feature for those who are outside the European Union and are able to use USDT in their regular life. So that was one of the, I think in my understanding, one of the most requested networks and assets we had previously. As you might see, it's pretty simple. So you are just selecting the asset you want, the network, and then you are getting an address to which you just send your assets from your non-custodial wallet, from your centralized exchange or elsewhere. So the addresses are constant in a way. So this is persistent address. So it will not change, but it might. Based on certain reasons, so we're always advising the users to check their address just in case, because that's a self-custody specifics. Depending on certain use cases, for the addresses might get changed. So it does not mean that you will lose your assets if you send something on the address which is newly generated, but still it's always a good practice to double check where you're depositing to. So that was one of, yeah.
To jump in on that one as well, because I think that's a really important point and something that COCA, handles really well. The amount of assets that are lost by users because they send it to the wrong address is frankly enormous. So number one, having a single address for all of your EVM networks is fantastic, and then obviously this single address for non-EVM networks. They may be slightly different if you're on Tron versus Solana, but it does remove a lot of that administrative error. But of course, as you said, there's always a circumstance where potentially there could be an update to the application, there could be an update on Aurora Intents, whatever it might be. But the fact that you have those safeguards in place to ensure that if a user accidentally does send to an address they've previously used, those assets still arrive. That's much more like a traditional banking system, right, than it is like crypto. Crypto today, it's gone. There's no one you can raise a support ticket to. There is no way to get it back. But with COCA, not only can they ensure that they get it, so you don't have to raise a support ticket, but they can ensure that they're always getting it in the right place. And I guess what's most similar to this would almost be sending money to a username on Revolut, right? So being someone who worked at Revolut when the feature went out, my username is just my name. The problem with that is everybody thinks that their Declan is me. So the amount of times I receive 15 euros, 20 euros from someone saying, thank you for someone I've never met, usually in Ireland, ironically. And again, having that system where it automatically then takes that back and gives it to the user, being able to see that within the kind of the crypto industry isn't something I think can be understated. Because it means users have that kind of safety net which you're providing them at COCA, to ensure that their assets are there and they can use them whenever they want.
You're totally right. I think that's one of the things I really loved in terms of Aurora as an infrastructure here and the intents you guys been building in terms of the deposits. It was basically the idea that if there is a space, so there is always a space for an error, right? What we as a company offering the end product, we should take care about these errors and to be able to get back the funds in case something happens for the user. And that's where I think this is a good strategical partnership for us to be able to handle all those errors the user might commit, not because they're planning to do that, but because this is their lack of experience or just making their first steps in crypto and crypto transfers. And that's, I think, amazing to be able to do this cross-chain unified experience similar to what Web2 is. And that's, as mentioned, is one of the goals we have, is to make your experience in Web3 as singular as Web2 experience is, but at the same time leave this core feature with you being a complete owner of your funds, your money, and your account.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I think that's probably a good place to start to wrap up. Actually, we started the stream by talking about how COCA is really bridging this gap between Web 2 and Web 3. But of course, you're up against companies that are worth $100 billion, right? More in the case of some of the more incumbent banks, right? Where do you think crypto banking, not necessarily COCA, but crypto banking as a whole, where do you think it's still behind traditional finance, and where is it ahead? And maybe that will tie it into something exciting that's coming next on COCA that the community should watch out for.
Yeah, so I think where we're still behind is for sure in terms of adoption, right? Because when we speak about fintechs, the most critical point here is to allow user to make this decision to switch to another product. Because fintech, since it's a very complex question and very complex behavior for the user, our brain is made in a way that we prefer sticking to the current tool, even if it's not favorable in your regard, but stick to it because I understand how it works.
Yeah.
It's simple for me. I get used to it. And that's, I think, the hardest challenge we need to overcome, is to allow those users to give them an understanding why is it better to switch, at least to look at an alternative. And I think in a certain way, if the situation with traditional assets will get worse, that's good for us, because in certain way, if huge giants like Tether and Circle, if their stable coins will still get on board the ecosystem, and we are of course relying on the stable coins much in terms of the functionality and backend logic. That's where we can be on top on a long distance, because we will not remove this access from the users. And I think in long-term perspective, that's where we are moving. Starting from 2019, when I just onboarded crypto, and where we are now, the amount of growth we see for the past years is amazing. And where we are on top, that's of course the infrastructure, and that's a complete game changer. So starting from the user benefits, the ones which I've talked a lot today, which is basically self-custody. That's of course a good benefit, not only from the ownership perspective, but also from the opportunities you are able to have, because I think in the next decades we will see an ability for the users to very easily switch between different fintechs depending on the use case you have with a single wallet. I think that's 100% what you should expect from the future fintechs, and that's where we are also looking at this issue and trying to understand what we should build for the users to select us, but not other crypto fintechs. Secondly, is basically rewards. So as mentioned, we are transparent here in terms of that for the majority of rewards, we are not paying the rewards from our pocket, but we are using the existing DeFi tools. And that's amazing because we don't need to follow this practice where we take $10 from you, give nine of them to other users in terms of like credits and etc., benefit on them, give you a small portion of revenue, and that's where you are. So we are not custodying, we're not paying tons of money to have this infrastructure. We are not having these physical offices, which from one side is a downside because here you lack trust a bit, because with a traditional bank you see an office, you can go there, talk to the people, and this might build some trust, but in my understanding this is also an illusion, because even the banks with large offices, they can fail, and that's what we've already experienced with certain crises which we faced
in the
previously.
UK, right? Lloyd's of London, 20 billion bailout, and people were like, yeah, okay, the money's safe, but they don't realize that 20 billion bailout has come from tax revenues, right? So even if you haven't lost your funds directly, you still lost your funds indirectly from your taxes. We've seen it in the United States. We've even seen it with EMIs like Wirecard, back in the day. And yeah, I mean, just kind of my 2 cents. I'd say that kind of self-custody component probably is the most valuable thing, at least from my perspective as a COCA user, and we've been one for quite some time now. It's knowing that even if the absolute worst happened tomorrow, even if you were regulated out of existence, right? My funds are safe. And
Yes.
sure, every country on earth, or at least most of them, have some form of deposit guarantee scheme, right? We've got FSCS in the UK, the US has a similar one, and it's up to a sizable amount, right? But it doesn't cover everything, and it doesn't cover everybody, and at the same time, it doesn't protect banks from runs on the banks. Like if you look at why a lot of these banks have failed, it's actually not because they've ran out of money, right? It's because sometimes it's just because of a rumor, right? One rumor, we saw it happen with the US bank, I forget the name, last year or the year before, uh, where there was a rumor that they were running out of funds. So what happens? Everybody made a run at the bank, and they did lose the funds. That can't really happen here because the user has the assets anyway, and you're not leveraging your company's funds to kind of support those deposits. And I think you touched on it earlier with the advent of AI, and now with cross-chain functionality, it's only going to become more stable, more secure for users. And of course, we've touched upon the concept of using even confidential intent, so it becomes more private, which is also an important distinction. So yeah, I think you've made some really good points there on kind of what the advantages are, and of course where the learnings are going to be.
Exactly. I think one of the most interesting internal things we are discussing within the team is basically how to add AI agentic payments. And I think many people and many fintechs are talking right now about the agentic payments, how this might work. We already have an internal demo where you can just chat with AI and it can book tickets or book a restaurant spot for you. So it works, but we are waiting a bit before pushing this to the production in a way, because to my understanding, there is right now a very small portion of users who can easily switch to an AI flow of managing your fintech life instead of traditional send, book, transfer, etc. Because removing all those things which is the security of such kind of agentic payments, right? Whether AI can handle certain issues or vulnerabilities which it might have in terms of someone asking them to make payment on your behalf and they doing it. So there is, I think, a behavioral kind of stuff. So how hard it was to switch users to try the new generation of banks, which I truly believe COCA is a part of the story. And the next step will be how to also add an AI in a way that it would feel more convenient rather than a standard UI of a neobank. And that's one of the things we are always playing internally with the new technologies here. Happy also to give you a bit of hand on the features we are currently talking internally with regards to the AI, and maybe together with Aurora team, we'll be able to see how to play a bit with this kind of agentic payments. I think this is one of the biggest updates I want to bring within this or next year, but only in a way which it will work for the users, but not like a certain addendum which you don't understand how to use.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Well, look, Vasili, thank you so much. Now, we do have a couple of questions from people in the community. So I guess the first one, you've largely covered some of the challenges, but I'll raise it anyway. So first of all, clearly a fan. COCA's a top tier among non-custodial apps. But there's going to be some challenges and massive opportunities ahead. I guess I will make a question from this, right? What's the biggest challenge that you're trying to solve right now?
I think enter a new market. So what we currently want to do is to replace a traditional banking apps and to offer COCA instead of them in certain regions. You need to be able to support local payment instruments, and you should be able not only to issue the card, which is currently working fine in the majority of countries, not worldwide, but still. The other thing is to be able to introduce this good switch from a traditional bank, or at least this support from moving your funds from a traditional bank to COCA. And then I think one of the largest challenges we are currently facing, how to introduce more regional tools to the blockchain-based fintech in a way that it would work and we do not require tons of licenses per each country we are entering.
Oh yeah, that one's particularly tricky. Well, actually, look, that actually leads perfectly into the next question, right? So, we've got Zubair here who wants to be able to use COCA in India. When's it going to be available in India? Is it something that's on the roadmap?
As of now, we are having internal discussions with the compliance team, as well as the verification team in terms of whether we are able to issue the card in India. As of now, like today, unfortunately, the card is not available there. But if you're like an Indian national but resident somewhere else where the card is available, you can get the card. But unfortunately, right now, directly in India, it's not supported. We truly value the Indian market, and we see that there is a huge potential there. And I think in the mid to long term perspective, we really want to introduce the card, but it might require certain additional licenses from us to be able to operate within India, or at least find a suitable partner who might like handle this stuff for us. So that's what we are currently looking and inspecting. So hopefully the team will get within updates with regards to the new regions within this year, and maybe we'll introduce more. And who knows, maybe India is coming a few months after this AMA session. So who knows?
Okay, thank you very much. And we've got a question from Roman here. So obviously, COCA is extremely closely related with WireX. But what are the distinctions between COCA and WireX? What's the advantage? What type of user, I guess, would be best served using COCA, and which type of user would be best served using WireX?
That's a good question. So yes, a part of the infrastructure we're having belongs, it's not proper to say belongs to WireX, but it's WireX based or WireX built it. So it's mainly some sort of payments we are having in bank partners, which are served through Wirex. So this is a part of certain infrastructure we are having behind the project. What's currently is different is basically we have different tier systems, and they're targeting like different user base. So for instance, if we speak about Virex, that's more about high portfolio individuals, because in order to move within the tiers, you need to have a high portfolio on within the app, and you need to maintain this. So you can just simply at 1,000 USD at the highest tier and do the spends and do not transfer the funds. And it's one of the questions of trust, because even if you tell that you are non-custody, people are still afraid of it. And we do understand that for us, it's a matter of time and long-term process of being transparent to allow users to organically deposit more and store more to get the APYs. So this one of, I would say, different views. So we don't require you to have a large amount of stable coins or your portfolio in an app to be to progress through tiers. Yes, we do require to get the token. In certain extent, that's a bit similar, but in my mind, that's also a bit different, because also you need to be paid there. So there is a change of mechanics in many kind of stuff in terms of the card itself and the bank features. We are to a certain extent similar, but recently we are adding many new features, such as, for instance, Aurora Intents support, and that's only a start, as I mentioned, which will introduce significantly more assets for deposit and withdrawal, which I think is a good game changer. We are also currently in discussion with many other partners, infrastructural ones, who might give certain additional perks which are not available to Virex One. And it's also a matter of taste, of course, at the end of the day. So fintech is not only about the perks. Perks, of course, matter, but also a question of experience. And I truly believe the experience differs. Which one to choose depends only upon you. So yeah, you can compare yourself and see which suits you better, whether it's Virex or Cast or any other product on the market, or it's COCA.
Yeah, no, amazing. And this next question I can actually answer on your behalf, because I've actually been in this circumstance. So, Leoton's asked, many users don't want to hold large balances on the card. They want to be able to fund it just in time, right before they pay. If the user sends USDC from Solana or BNB chain while standing in line at a supermarket. Well, Leoton, the answer to that is yes. So you probably can't see the fish in my tank behind me, but I actually bought those fish with my COCA card, and I bought two new fish only last weekend. And I was in the queue, and I realised I hadn't topped up my card, and I was literally able to do it, and it was deposited and available for me to spend on my COCA card. I think within about 10-15 seconds, all in. So yeah, you can absolutely depend on the balance to be updated within seconds. And it really is a very important question and really important feature, because we've seen it historically, right, where you can top up a gift card, you can top up a balance, and it might take an hour or a day. And that just doesn't work, because a lot of the time you're buying reactively. At least I do, because I'm terrible for it. But for me, if I see something, I'm like, oh yeah, I want that. And yeah, so I actually tested this myself, and I was very pleased, to see that it settled instantly, or near instantly, and I was able to pay for that, tap of a card like you would with anything else. And I can see that actually probably covers a couple of the other questions here. So we've got one: can I use my COCA card for cross-chain payments wherever it's accepted, just like a credit card? Absolutely, yes, you can. That's literally the whole purpose of what it's designed for. It works very, very well. As you know, Vasili, I'm quite a big user on COCA. I'm a big fan of how easy and seamless it really is to use. Uh, Now, I think we probably have time for one or two more questions. Okay, so this is a good question, Vasili. How does the COCA card prevent failed or duplicated cross-chain payments?
Mm-hmm.
And now this is probably a bit of an unfair one for you, because actually this isn't something that COCA itself would deal with. This is actually something that would be dealt with within Aurora Intents. And we've actually seen examples of this, right? Where a user has tried to do a transfer and for whatever reason it's not gone through. Generally, what happens is it will kind of retry, and if it can't do that, then a refund is processed back to the user. So there isn't an instance here where the user's going to lose money. They are protected and they are safeguarded. Now, I can see a few more questions have appeared. Duh, 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 duh. Okay, so let's have a look. So Saeed, if a live swap on Aurora Intents experiences delays, how are the payments guaranteed to complete instantly? Yeah, great question. So again, this is more Aurora Intents, than COCA. But what you need to understand in terms of Aurora Intents, obviously it sits on a near intents protocol, and near intents works in a different way, right? So it depends on a solver network. So what will happen is your intention. So say, for example, that your intention is that you would like USDC on COCA to the tune of $1,000, right? And you're going to pay with it with Solana. That will be broadcast to the solver network that will then compete, to be the one that secures that deposit for you. And that form of competition isn't just about cost; it's also about speed, and to ensure finality and slippage. So there isn't really going to be a situation where you're forced to go down a particular route, and therefore you have to wait ages. Now, in the scenario where, I don't know, let's say there's a technical issue at a protocol level, well then of course that wouldn't be within COCA's control. But that's when COCA would be contacting us, and we have chats where the response time is literally usually within a minute, right? To say, hey, there's an issue here. It's flagged on our internal systems. It's flagged on COCA's internal systems, and then we resolve that. But of course, like with any infrastructure, provider, the infrastructure has to obviously be operating, and if there's issues, that's where having a really strong relationship and partnership between both parties is really critical, and that's absolutely what we've got here. Okay, I think we've probably got time for one or two more, so I'm just going to have a quick look because there's more and more questions. Can I buy you 3D prints with COCA card, Declan? Sorry, I just got to put that on there. He knows I'm a big fan of 3D printing. Okay, what have we also got? Okay, great question here. Will COCA eventually support automatic spending rules and features such as always spend USDC before ETH?
That's a very good question. So at the moment, currently we do the conversions in the stable coins for certain reasons, basically because we want to be able to get an APY from staking protocols such as, for instance, Morphon, etc. That's why we need to somehow bring this to a certain currency. But what we are also thinking in parallel is to be able to introduce more, let's say, Web3 professional features. So, for instance, if you have ease and you need, for instance, and you don't want for it to be converted in stables and stored in a stable way, we are thinking of getting an opportunity to add an ease account where the assets will be stored and staked in Morpho and other protocols in signature form. We will not need to spend it directly, but you will be able to get, let's say, the credit and on-chain loan based on an amount of balance you have, and you will be able to spend it and then liquidate it either from the balance you have staked in terms of the, for instance, Ethereum or any other currency, or you are able to cover this loan through other assets, such, for instance, just deposit USDC and cover the assets without touching your ETH balance. So we are thinking on how to make this work in a product within a credit functionality, credit card functionality, and in general loan functionality we're planning to introduce. So since we are planning to do this also on chain and to do it in a self-custody manner, there are tons of tricky stuff we need to handle because, as mentioned, we are trying to build a Web2 friendly interface. And if we just add Ethereum or any other coin in the app directly within a banking section, this will completely blow mind for all non-Web3 users, and it will not work. So, short answer, yes, we do plan to add this. when depends on several factors. First of all, the infrastructure to support not only the ease balance, but also the loan functionality. So you can borrow and lend, not without the need to convert this to stables or just pay through it. This number one. And secondly, how to do it in a way which will not blow the minds of Web2 guys.
No, great. And I think, look, we've got time for two more. The first one I can cover off. So can you clarify the payment flow? Does COCA directly pay via Aurora Intents? So the answer to that is no. So essentially, Aurora Intents is what is allowing the user to deposit funds into their COCA account. Your card is essentially your payment gateway. You're using that card in a shop to pay for petrol, whatever it is you want to do online, like any traditional card works today. So it's not Aurora Intent that is processing that payment. It is COCA with the debit card that you're provided. Aurora is simply the means for you to deposit assets, just like you would in a normal bank where you would transfer from one bank account to the other. And then the final question, which I think is a nice way actually to wrap up today, is one for you, Vasili. So, Vasili, what are your expectations regarding which specific parts of Web3 should be delegated to AI agents, and how fast do you think we will reach that level of automation?
Yeah, very nice question. As mentioned before, we're also trying to find a sweet spot for an AI. I think for the past few years, it's amazing how AI integrated into our daily lives, and I think that's one of the mind-blowing things that happened for the past like 10 to 20 years on how smartphones get into us and into the regular life we have, and the AI is doing even a better job here. In terms of, I think my answer here will have two parts. One is an overall AI integration, and I think it doesn't matter whether this is like a traditional fintech or blockchain kind of product or any other product on the market. The first and the foremost question here is whether it is secure to introduce such kind of tool to your specific app or flow.
100%.
And when we speak about finance in general, we need to 100% be on the same page that adding sort of AI agent to this means that we as a software provider, as an app provider, we should be 100% completely sure that it's secure and that within a certain vulnerability which we are not aware of, the user funds cannot be withdrawn even with his consent because a certain command is sent to AI. I think within what we will see within a few years is the self-custody wallets, such as MetaMask, Trust, Exodus, and many others on the market. They will slowly play a bit with an AI removing the current, let's say, app and button flow to AI managed transfers and etc. And it works especially good in terms of intent-based approach. So basically, that's a long story. I think we can tell with Declan on terms of what are the intents and why the intents are so popular in general as a general term within the Web3. Because it's in fact a completely different model of how the things operate, because you don't need to do the manual command. You just show an intent and the system does everything for you. And I think that's what we will see with achieved through AI in the non-custody wallets first, because they are on the front line of the new technologies adoptions within the Web3. And in many DeFi protocols, we will see, of course, AI integration in staking and in APRs and different staking protocols, 100%. Certain complex cross-chain movement of funds, I am completely sure they will be managed through AI. Also using Intents infrastructure as a power source here. And at the end of the day, as soon as this part of kind of stuff is settled and is tested, it will be also live within the fintech apps. But at the same time, I think for COCA, our own approach here is that within next 12 months, we want to add AI automation to certain payments, the regular payments, certain booking experience within the app, but on a very iterative and step-by-step process where only a certain things can be done through AI, which at the end of procedure you need to confirm, at least in its early days, to be able to make sure that this is secure and the user funds will not get lost.
No, amazing. Well, look, folks, hopefully we've been able to answer all of your questions. Vasili, thank you so much for joining us. The whole point of this connected series and us separating it out from Alpha Leaks is to really give us time to actually dive into the nuts and bolts, right, in terms of how our partners work. So it's been fantastic that you've been able to take that time to really walk everybody through what COCA's doing, where it's come from, how we're working together and what the future looks like. Hopefully, everybody listening in has also learned quite a bit, about COCA. As you guys know, I'm a big fan myself, so I definitely recommend checking it out and look at what they're doing. Vasili, thank you for joining, and to everybody else, thank you for joining today's Connected. Goodbye now, and take care.
Yeah, thanks. Goodbye, everyone.